Hi, I'm Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, back with my plans and pans. Well, I had the real joy of being at the State of the Union address. I haven't always said that about every State of the Union address, but this one was really special for me. I don't know, some of you let me know that you saw me in my red outfit on the floor of the House cheering. Yes, I was. I didn't mind standing and sitting and standing and sitting to cheer on the President of the United States. I began on a very somber note, of course, talking about what is going on in Ukraine. And we had in the audience, and the president called on her or acknowledged her, the ambassador from Ukraine. I had a briefing from her. She's absolutely powerful and brilliant and working really 24/7 to do everything she can to give us advice on how we can help the people of Ukraine. But I think what we saw from the President of the United States is really an unprecedented ability to bring together the entire world, really, the Western world, and to isolate Russia from the civilized world, because this kind of unprovoked attack of a sovereign country is really the basic rule of international peace, that you just don't cross borders like that. Meantime, we are seeing real suffering from on the part of the Ukrainians, but also the president talked about the extraordinary courage. There was just a lot of applause and appreciation for the way that the Ukrainians are pushing back. He made very clear that the sanctions, and there may be more forthcoming, has really crippled in many ways the economy. Their currency has lost wealth. They have trouble getting any kind of loans, and the oligarchs are certainly not happy right now that they can't get access to their money, and that they can't travel and their children can't travel out of the country. And he did announce that all flights over the United States from Russia will be banned from now on. We are continuing to help with weapons, not certainly personnel on the ground. The president reiterated that there would be no U.S. military personnel on the ground in Russia, but we have deployed some to our NATO allies, and we are providing weaponry for Ukraine. This is a very difficult time, and Putin is proceeding. But even in Russia, there have been demonstrations against what he's doing. And there was a vote by pretty much all of the countries in the world, most anyway, condemning what Russia is doing. This is not going to end well for Vladimir Putin, but in the meantime, it's going to hurt a lot of people in Ukraine. So we're doing all that we can, and I thought the President of the United States presented a very strong and effective presentation on what we are doing to help. The rest of the speech has so many things that I think were so important that we needed to hear. He talked about lowering prescription drug prices. He talked about more focus on nursing home safety and quality, which is something that I've worked on for a very long time. And a lot of the things that I have worked for have been included in major legislation. He talked about mental health as well as physical health, which is so important. He talked about the cancer moonshot. that, he set a date in the future where we want to cut cancer, the prevalence of cancer in half, and to really make sure that the research and development of those cures is on the agenda right now. What I loved about this speech is, yes, it touched on a lot of things, but these are the kinds of things that ordinary people are thinking about. He talked about price gouging, which is one of the reasons that we have inflation. And I just had a hearing in my subcommittee on price gouging and these corporations that are taking advantage of this time and the pandemic and even beyond to raise all kinds of prices, drug prices, food prices, all the commodities, the essential things that we need for our economy to be able to grow. He talked about make it in America, that it is time that we manufacture here at home and not have to rely on other countries. And of course, you remember that there was this whole time when US corporations were shipping jobs overseas. Well, that time has ended, and we want to now make it in America, make everything in America. So I just love the speech. I went down after it was over and got a big hug from the president, which I really appreciated. And he had ended his speech by saying that we could do this. And so I said, Mr. President, we can do this. And I think he said the State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. And we are. We're strong and resilient. And he didn't fail to express empathy and concern for the challenges that many Americans make. Hardly anybody could be as empathetic as this president, but he was optimistic, not just empathetic, about what we can do in the future and do it together. So I thought it was kind of the shot in the arm and the boost that we needed to set on this new path, or a more optimistic path going forward. We passed a number of really significant bills this week. Yes, the House of Representatives has been turning out the legislation that I hope that the Senate will pass. One is called the Crown Act, and it deals with how hair that we express ourselves in the hairdos that we have, and to prevent discrimination. To prevent discrimination in the workplace, in schools, in housing, and accommodations, so that the texture of the hair or the hairstyle that you choose cannot be used as a reason for discrimination. So I think that's a really good thing, a really positive thing for our kids in school, for people of color, for artists who want to experiment with their hairdos. So that is the Crown Act. We also passed the Emmett Till Antilynching Act. Can you imagine? We have never been able in the United States of America to pass in both houses of Congress an anti-lynching act. Emmett Till, you I'm sure remember or have read about, was a 14-year-old who, when visiting the South, was accused of flirting with a white woman. And for that, he was kidnapped, tortured, mutilated, and killed. So this makes, for the first time, lynching would be a federal crime. And let's just hope, again, that this will pass the United States Senate without a lot of debate. I have to say, there were 3 Republicans who voted no on the anti-lynching law. Disappointing. We should note that Bobby Rush, our own Illinois congressman, was the chief sponsor of the Anti-Lynching Act. You may know that Ahmaud Arbery, in 2020, a Black man who was jogging was chased down and murdered. Really like absolutely a modern day lynching. The good news is that his murderers were convicted. They will pay a hefty price for what they did. It was without a doubt a hate crime. Hate crimes in the past have been hard to prove, but there's no question that that's what this was. And so it looks like, at least in terms of prosecutions, that we're starting to see more convictions. And I think among the things that has helped have been the cell phones and videos that have come, the fact that police have to have cameras on their bodies. So in the past, where you were asked for proof and there oftentimes was not considered enough proof, well, now we are seeing the kind of convictions that we need for these discriminatory murders that are taking place. Another really important bill that we passed is called the Honor Our Pact Act. That's our promises that we have made to our veterans. And it's a very comprehensive bill that toxic exposure for veterans will be dealt with. For example, the burn pits that have been so common in conflicts around the world that have exposed our soldiers, some huge swaths of land where you have these burn pits that expose them to deadly toxins. Now, first of all, we're not going to be using burn pits. The president talked about that. But also, we're going to be sure and take care of our veterans. And then there were hearings, and I had one in my committee. There were 5 different bills that we discussed in a legislative hearing that really would hold big tech accountable. You've heard me talk about that a lot. But the time for excuses and apologies is over, and now it's time for us to act. So we talked about the kinds of legislation that we needed to pass. One of them had to do with surveillance that tech companies do, getting a lot of our private information and using it for advertising. And how many times have you been online and something popped up that maybe some time ago you had mentioned or considered buying, and now they have taken your private information, personal information, and use that for surveillance in advertising. So there's legislation that would ban that kind of surveillance in advertising. That's one bill. I'm actually one of the chief co-sponsors. My colleague Ann Asher from California is the other. Another important bill has to do with algorithm discrimination. We have seen a history of algorithmic discriminations where information does or doesn't go to certain communities, maybe depending on wealth or color or gender. And we want to undo and prohibit that kind of discrimination for protected classes. And we have Congresswoman Yvette Clarke to introduce that legislation. So we discussed these bills that would hold big tech accountable. In the Oversight Committee, I'm on the Oversight Subcommittee, as well. And we had a hearing on the impact of the pandemic on frontline healthcare workers. And we certainly know that down the line, we owe a real debt to doctors and nurses and people who have worked in nursing homes, during people who have suited up every day and gone to work into very dangerous situations. Remember, many of them went before there were even any vaccines. And so we talked about that. One of the issues that I brought up that actually a problem that's existed well before the pandemic has to do with the nurse-patient ratio, and that so many nurses are finding that they have to take care of far too many patients, and that there are consequences to that. One of those consequences is that there is nurse burnout. I've talked to so many nurses over the years, but particularly now, who are very concerned. They love their job, they want to be caregivers, but that they feel that they can't give the attention that is needed to each patient because they have so many. But the second consequence is that because of this overburdening of nurses, that the patient outcomes are worse. And I asked questions of the experts that were there. Do you have data that shows that? And the answer was that in states, and there are some, California predominantly, that does have a law requiring nurse-patient ratios that are much less burdensome on the nurses, that the patient outcomes are greatly improved. And so I wanted to underscore that, because I do have legislation that would be national in order to make sure that we help our patients and our nurses and their safety and their outcomes at the same time. So that was the issue that I raised. I do want to end, as usual, with the coronavirus, which the president talked about, and really is one of the successes of his administration. The numbers of people who have gotten tested over the time, just the 1 year and a little plus of his administration, has been extraordinary. Although I still say that, still only 70% of Americans are, but now this is a matter of choice. But nonetheless, we are seeing now a pretty dramatic decline, to the point that 70% of Americans now live in top tier communities in terms of lower hospitalizations, lower death, lower severity of outcomes, because if people who get the virus, and that means that the mask requirements have been lifted, and that's true in Illinois. Although I think, as I pointed out last week, I believe still that Chicago Public Schools teachers and personnel and students are still wearing masks. But by and large, the mask mandates have been lifted. I was at a briefing this morning, though, from someone from the Roosevelt Institute, who was talking about what we know worldwide about the coronavirus and the variants. And what he said is, yes, we've had great improvements, but it's not over. And I just feel obligated every week to say, continue to be careful. We've had a number of members of Congress, now 5, who have tested positive in over the last week. So we want to make sure that you avoid situations of overcrowding, to have your mask in your pocket, and to continue to be careful. On the COVID front, though, I did want to let you know that Dr. Ezeki with the Illinois Department of Public Health has announced her retirement. She has given us great briefings every week, along with Governor Pritzker, about COVID as it has moved along. And I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Ezeki and my gratitude to you for watching my pans and plans, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for watching my video. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where my handle is @Jan Schakowsky.